Thank you so much, Sindhu, and thank you for having me here. Guys, so as Sindhu's explained, I have been working in different capacities as a HR manager or as a HR consultant and running my own setup for the last 24 odd years now.
When you had a great successful career, and I can see that you were with Mercer Consulting as well as Capgemini for some time. So how did it come to your mind that you need to leave the corporate world and start something of your own?
When I operated in Europe, what I realized was that a lot of the really hungry players in the marketplace were actually not the large consulting firms, but they were actually mid-sized or smaller firms, more entrepreneur-led organizations, which were actually doing the really good work. They were more hungry, they were more committed, they were driving greater client satisfaction. So that became like a little bit of an indicator as to perhaps that's where the direction for my career lies, that maybe one should explore it. The other part was that I've always been a little bit of a, how should I say? So one of the quintessential elements from a career standpoint was also the questioning of why do I have to follow this path? I had the urge to break that traditional approach to building one's career, and that's how I made the segue into starting InQbex.
Once you are acquiring the client, so is there any we can say as an employer, as an entrepreneur, you ask basic questions, fundamental question about their culture right from the scratch, or do they approach you to just do overall thing, like there's no deep down work?
It happens both ways. So a number of, for example, organizations that we work with, if they're evolved organizations, which means that they have mature HR processes and practices, many a time they know what they want, right? So they just come and tell you that, okay, this is the transaction that we want to do. But in most of the other environments, people pose it as a problem that they are encountering. It's a business problem, but it has its root in HR or people process or people, right? So somebody comes to you and says that, for example, right now, everybody is experiencing this phenomenon called the Great Resignation, right? People are leaving right, left and center. It's pent up post-pandemic, and clients are posing that as the problem to us, saying that, listen, what can I do? I am a good organization, I have a great culture, but people are still leaving, right? So now that requires you to start from scratch and try and understand what could be cultural drivers, what could be process drivers or policy drivers, what could be managerial drivers, because many times people leave work, jobs because they don't like working with the people that they're working with. Salaries, etc., come much lower in the pegging order when it comes to taking a decision to leave a place. So in those cases, yes, you do have to, and that's the joy of consulting, when you actually get into understanding a new client environment and figuring out what are the drivers of success and then coming up with solutions.
In terms of startups or growing startup or any big companies, HR is nothing but the culture of the company. So you have to set certain, you can say, founder mentality in yourself. And by founder mentality in yourself, finding out best fit out for their culture. So how do you manage that?
I'll talk about two elements to it. Okay, if you ask me, there are two aspects to it. The culture follows structure and strategy. Okay, so I think when we work with startups or younger organizations, the first thing that we typically engage with them is in translating their business strategy into org structure as to how they are organized, because that lends itself to the agility, the kind of outcomes they're trying to drive, right? So that's, I think, the first step. The cultural aspect goes hand in glove, but it typically follows where, so for example, they could be a startup founder who's absolutely money minded. Let's take that as an example, right? Who's only interested in, making sure that investments happen. And you come across these type of people fairly regularly now, right? Who are interested largely in making sure that they are right in the eyes of the investors. And beyond that, people are just resources, right? Okay, and in the same breath, you come across startup founders, and I've been very lucky to encounter some of them in the year of the pandemic, for example, who have said that, listen, I don't have funds, but I want to protect my people. I have to get rid of people right now because that's what the investors are pushing for, but I want to create some sort of a safety net for them. So I think founders come in all shapes and forms, like all of us, right? So their mindset many a times shapes their organization, and sometimes it's more of for me personally, it's more fulfilling, where people have a desire to actually take a sustainable look at the business rather than a short-term view of a transaction, right? Because that's what the former view leads to. That if you're primarily just trying to deliver to the investor expectation, while it works in the short run, it also creates toxic cultures. Whereas the latter, while it may lead to short-term pain, it will actually lead to a much more motivating and integrated team, which will lead to sustainable success for the business. And that's part of the education that we have to do with founders, okay? Because HR is the last line item in the priority spectrum many a times for young organizations.
Any startup founder which is growing and which is having, I can say, a growth mindset, very good growth mindset, they spend almost 70% of their time recruiting the people, because they themselves, they know that this is the best fit for my culture, my company culture, because founder runs the culture.
Both the things, right? One is the resourcing mindset, right? That because I need to grow, I need to throw people at the problem, right? So that's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it, I will get involved and therefore I will create my own team. And I think those guys are actually far more successful in the long run.
Yeah.
Okay, people who actually invest in building their own teams in the right spirit.
So you can't judge black and white for any kind of employee to get employed.
So that's the other challenge, right? Particularly in India, I think the labor market itself is so complex, right? Because the employees who are coming through the pipeline are coming up with such, sometimes transactional outlook that it becomes very difficult to actually take right decisions, because you're trying to balance business sustainability by saying, I need a person to do this, right? A lot of my clients, for example, tell me that, listen, my business will stop if I don't have a product manager right now. At the same time, all the product managers are demanding 3 times, 4 times the salaries that they're getting. So how do I balance it? Because I don't want those guys, but I need someone, right? So that's the challenge of the market right now.
Now the innovations are taking place on a daily basis. Technology is taking over, and the traditional HR, so to say, for every work in HR, there is a tool available. Like there's recruitment tool, there's performance management tool. So what role HR is left with now? I mean, in the current scenario, I just want to understand that.
Okay, so while there are tools available, I don't know adoption, how much of that is true. And frankly, you need good HR practitioners, okay, even to work these tools. So the tools are not necessarily a replacement for good HR practitioners, okay. The tools are coming in, many of them, for example, the AI that is coming in HR admin is coming in because, generally speaking, HR administrators have been really poor at the jobs. Okay, so the perception that the HR function has in the market or in the minds of employees, it not because of a stereotype, it is on account of actual actions done or not done by practitioners themselves, right? So they will always be, and this is true for any profession, Sindhu, that there will always be a layer of redundancy that will exist with advances in technology, with new ways of working coming in. Having said that, I think the HR professional needs to adapt. The good HR professional needs to learn about the technologies and how to best use them, right? Because the human will always run the technology. It's not going to be the other way around.
Absolutely.
Okay, so therefore, if for example, okay, and this is again a stereotypical thing that I'm saying, general sense is that HR folks are not very good with numbers. It's a stereotype, right? It's a stereotype that exists, and outside of the compensation people, generally HR folks are shy of dealing with numbers. Now, measurement is coming in a big way into HR, right? People or businesses are saying that, it's no longer just about common sense HR, which anyone can do. I want there to be measurement around my decisions. So if I've been taking certain type of decisions over the last 4 years, I want to know how they have impacted my company's bottom line. Period. Right? So the HR practitioner has no choice but to get number friendly. Okay. Otherwise, they will become less relevant, is the way I will describe it. It's not as if people will lose their jobs or none of that is going to happen in the short run, in the medium run. No, none of that is going to happen. It's just that they will become less relevant in the scheme of things. They will become a little bit more high touch people who are not aligned to technology, while the rest of the organization is more technology aligned, and so on and so forth. I think that's where I think HR professionals need to watch out and make sure that they are constantly learning, but they are keeping themselves at least aware of what is happening in their profession. I think is a starting point. And recognizing what they are not good at is always good, right? So if as I said, goes back to self-awareness, right? If you figure out as a professional that I lack in my numeric orientation, spend some time, find that finance guy who works with you as a colleague, spend some time with them, try to understand how they do their job, how they will look at your function. Because it will just give you a new perspective and a new way of doing things.
While you shift to Dubai, so how's it difficult or easier for you to you can say acquire clients or convince them for the HR consultants?
So it's as easy or as difficult as it would be anywhere else where you're starting out. I feel that I have gone back by about 10 years in terms of my career, because I'm starting again in a new market, absolutely, where we are trying to establish our presence. What I like about this market is there is a general sense of optimism and positivity. Okay, and that I think so there is a desire to to learn more about what is happening in the HR world and so on and so forth. So I find a certain degree of openness, which I think is motivating for me also. So therefore, when both the things happen together, then you have the energy to go and try it out again. And I am really enjoying the last 6 odd months that I've been here, trying to start from scratch again. It takes me back to old days. This region, as I said, is also I think a very optimistic region right now, and looking at possibilities and new things. So we are also coming up with new things. We are coming up with new HR technology and so on. We started developing tools to support our consulting work, right? And we want to take that to a market where there is openness to experiment with it, is the way I will put it, which I think made me choose this market.
The HR tool you are developing, so that totally depend upon your framework you developed, or how does it? How are you developing it?
So we are developing HR tools which are very, very aligned. So we're not making the large scale HR information system that typically a lot of people are chasing, or a recruitment system, which is the flavor of the year. We've said that we want to make tools which are very, very aligned to the consulting work that we do. So we made two tools. One is a productivity tool, which basically helps assess an organization's productivity over a period of time. It helps you see whether or not you are deploying resources in the right manner, whether you're overstaffed, whether you're spending too much money on salaries, if you're spending too much money on low performers, those kind of things. It's an analytics tool. It gives you a report against market benchmarks. The other one is an assessment tool, which is a fairly commonly available tool, where you can mount large-scale assessments of staff or training needs identification or for hiring. Okay, so now both of these are very close and synergistic to the work that we do otherwise. We do a lot of work in org design, we do a lot of work in talent development. So they are very synergistic and go hand in glove with what we do.
What Incubase is doing currently and how it is creating an impact?
So we are HR advisory, and now carefully calling ourselves a HR analytics firm also. And what we do is we work with, we have a B2B model, which means that we work with enterprises. We work on trying to solve problems which have their root in people, business problems which have their root in people. Broadly speaking, there are 4 or 5 areas that we do a lot of work in. One is around organization design, which again, as I was saying, for a startup could mean designing the future state organization. A number of young entrepreneurs we work with, we help them as they move from, maybe a seed capital to a Series A round, where investors want to see what the organization will look like in the future, how the business strategy will be supported by an organization. We could also work with legacy firms in terms of reorganizing and restructuring from a productivity standpoint. So that's one broad area of work. The other area that we do a lot of work in is around talent management, where we work with, creating systems to attract the right talent, to develop people's skills, assess them to continuous basis, help them put them on a developmental track to help them build their careers and so on. So that's also a significant area of work. The third broad area I would say is around employee engagement. We started focusing a lot more on this, about how an employee experiences an organization. It's particularly relevant when you talk about things like mental health, well-being, because those are very, very important components. People are also demanding from their employers, what is your purpose and whether my purpose aligns with your purpose and so on. Because a lot of youngsters are today trying to chase a dream which is more entrepreneurial in nature, rather than perhaps what was true for my generation, which is to say that I can find a good job, right? But those people who are getting into jobs also need a certain type of an environment or a culture that they want to thrive in. And that's an increasing expectation from the employees. And we want to try and balance employee and employer expectations in this respect. Because many a times the employers are looking backwards, the employees are looking forward. So how do you get them together on the same plane? That's something that we work on as well. So that's broadly it. And our technology, as I said, supports each of these type of initiatives that we focus on. They are enabling technologies. They can be used on standalone basis. They can also be used to do any of the objectives that I talk about.